in the midst of these discussions about social justice and race and sex and all these other things, at the end of the day, the question is, what does God say about us? What does God say about us? And is what God says about us sufficient? And when we start talking about who we are in Christ, when we start talking about our unity in Christ, our brotherhood and our relationships, do we believe that the Bible is sufficient in that regard? And one of the scariest things about all of this talk is that we're beginning to see a new hermeneutic develop, where now sin is institutional as opposed to being in the heart of man. We're reading things differently here. And not only that, but we're starting to develop a new canon to where if you're not seeing things rightly on these issues, people are not saying you need to go to this text. They're saying you need to read Divided by Faith. You need to read Ta-Nehisi Coates. You need to read, right? If you're not getting this, then here's a list of books that you need to read in order to then be able to read the scriptures rightly as it relates to our unity with one another in Christ. That is a problem. Because I believe that the Bible is absolutely sufficient, not just inerrant, but absolutely sufficient for all matters of faith and practice. And how we deal with one another across ethnicities is a matter of faith and practice. The Bible is sufficient for that. Again, I am not arguing that we shouldn't read other things. I've quoted other things over the course of this weekend. But the Bible is sufficient. Let me put an even finer point on it. I worry when we begin to hear people say things that would suggest that I've had the Bible all this time, and I've had relationships with brethren of different ethnicities all this time. But it wasn't until I read this book that I finally understood God's heart on this issue of justice as it relates to race and ethnicity. No, and it's not even, it's when I finally read this book and this book was an exposition of, no, when I read this sociology book. And so now we've got sociology overriding and governing our theology. That's not okay. That is hugely problematic. Again, I'm not suggesting that we don't read sociology. One of my degrees is in sociology. We didn't have anyone to teach our sociology class and for our undergraduates at ACU. And so for the last couple of years, I've been teaching. Intro to Sociology. By the way, loving every minute of it, because it is an incredible tool in understanding how worldview is shaped and how worldview has been co-opted. Because there are few things that have been more potent in driving our culture in certain directions antithetical to biblical truth than sociology.